Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey, everybody. This is Debbie, your host of the Whole Athlete, the Whole Triathlete podcast. Kind of jump around topics because I find it's really important to help you improve performance in life and sports, endurance world sports, triathlons, by working on the whole you from the inside out. And one of the topics I'd like to go into is performance gains with how we train. And one of my favorite things is what we are wearing on our feet. As a personal trainer for 25 years, I own a fitness studio and have been in the personal training side of coaching and now kind of going nutritional therapy world. But what people wear on their feet makes a huge difference how I train them as personal training clients, and as well as running shoes and their outdoor shoes for training. So I found this company, XERO Shoes, and of course they're out of Boulder because all my friends and favorite companies seem to be in Boulder. But Sashen, one of the co-founders of XERO Shoes, is on the show today, and we're going to talk about natural running and minimalist shoes and all of that. So thank you for coming on the show today.
My pleasure. Well, let's start with a simple thing. When you said that you deal with people differently based on what they're wearing, tell me more about that. And I'm asking because that is so rare to hear. So I'm like all giddy and excited.
Well, as I was saying before we started recording, that I've worked with clients for many years, but the minimal shoe type stuff I've been into more the barefoot training. I'd rather people wear no shoes at all when they work out. And I find I'm really big into form and alignment and engaging the right muscles and how they land and how they spread their toes out and how they move correctly. And I can't tell what they're doing, and they don't know what they're doing when they're wearing a big, bulky running shoe. Go ahead.
Well, that's one of my favorite things. Like someone will email me. I've gotten this a few times where they have worn one of our shoes and they send me a picture and they say, well, there's something wrong with the materials because look, I'm wearing out the heel really quickly. And I say, well, you're riding and you're heel striking. They go, well, I don't do that. I go, well, send me a video. And they send me a video and, needless to say, they're overstriding and heel striking. But the part that amazes me is they don't know they're doing it because they've been in big, thick padded shoes for so long, they literally can't feel it. And that just floored me. It's actually similar to, I met a guy once and I said, I asked him if he was hungry and he said, yeah. And I said, I'm curious, how do you know? He goes, what do you mean, how do I know? I'm hungry. And I was expecting him to say something like, well, I feel this emptiness in my stomach. And he said, well, I'm hungry. And I said, well, don't you feel the pit in your stomach thing? He goes, what are you talking about? And, some people just don't have that thing below their neck that they know how to use.
Uh-huh. And, as, getting into more nutritional therapy and health coaching, and what I term as the holistic method, working on the whole person, coaching them, is that a lot of people don't have that mind-body connection and awareness of connecting their body and engaging their core and their stabilizers when they're doing any type of exercise. I see people in the gym all the time doing, say, a bicep curl, and they're standing there doing it and their whole body's kind of moving around and they're just not connecting. They're just disconnected from their own body. So before we
well, sorry, I'm going to interrupt again.
Yeah.
So when it comes to feet, this is a really interesting and simple thing. Your brain is designed; it's very plastic, and it means it just can change in various ways. And one way is that if you give it the feedback that it's looking for, it will heighten the awareness of what you're doing. And if you get rid of that feedback, it'll go, oh, you're not paying attention to that? All right, we're done. So if, for example, you taped your first two fingers together, after a while, your brain would basically think that you only had one finger. And while that seems kind of crazy, what that means is if you touch these two fingers, you would feel it like one finger. If you took the tape off, you wouldn't be able to move them independently. Eventually, you could get it back because we're wired to have, not our fingers not taped together. But when it comes to feet, you have more nerve endings in the sole of your feet than anywhere but your fingertips and your lips. You're supposed to feel things with your soles. And if you don't do that, then your brain goes, oh, we're done with that. All right, well, I'm out of here. And you just lose so much when you aren't aware of what's happening at the other end of your body from your head.
So go back to what what made you go into this business? And what I always love to ask every guest on the show is, what is your purpose, your passion, and your why?
Well, how we got into this is that my wife and I are naive and stupid. And so and we literally, 7 months after we started XERO Shoes, we had some guys sitting at our kitchen table who had all started at Reebok like 40 years earlier. And they said, we really believe in what you're doing. We think natural movement is hugely important. But we've been and we would do this with you, but we've been in the footwear business so long that we're not stupid enough to try and start a shoe company. And we said, yeah, we know that the only way to get anything done is with a certain amount of naivete and hyper-optimism. So what happened for me more specifically, though, is back 11 years ago as of today, actually almost to the day now that I think of it, I got back into sprinting after a 30-year break. And I was getting injured pretty much every 2 weeks if I had a good 2 weeks. And at one point, after a couple of years of this, a friend of mine who's a world-class cross-country runner said to me, why don't you take off your shoes and run barefoot and see what you discover? And I did. And what I discovered is why I was getting injured and how to stop getting injured. And it's not rocket science. The gist is doing it wrong hurt. And I couldn't tell when I was wearing my regular running shoes. And in bare feet, it was screamingly, literally obvious. And making the change was equally natural, because just trying to find a way to move that didn't hurt led me to having better form and not doing the things that were causing the problems that I was getting. And after that, my injuries went away. I became much faster. I became a Masters All-American sprinter. Technically, for men over 55, you may be talking to the fastest Jew in the world. And so I just loved the whole feeling of natural movement, which I hadn't had for so long. And I started making sandals just based on this 10,000-year-old design, similar to what the Tarahumara in Mexico wear, where they just get some scraps of tire and strap those to their feet. I found some rubber from a shoe repair place, some rope from Home Depot, figured out a way to lace them that actually worked. And that was just my goofy little hobby of making minimalist running sandals for people, until one day a guy named Michael Sandler, who was a coach, said, I've got a book coming out about barefoot running, and if you treated this hobby like a business, I'd put you in the book. And I had been an internet marketer since 1992. I built like 500 websites. So I rushed home with this brilliant idea and told my wife about it. And she assured me that I was completely delusional and I shouldn't do it. And it wouldn't make any money. It was a waste of our time. And I agreed, because I'm a good husband. And after she went to bed, I built a website because, I'm a husband. and here we are, literally almost 9 years later. So that's how. Now the why. Oh man. We are on a mission to get people to use their bodies, to use their feet. When, if you don't use it, you lose it. And it couldn't be more true than for anything other than your feet. If you went to a doctor and he told you that, let's say your hand was bothering you, and he said, we're going to have to make that immobile for the rest of your life. Or your neck was bothering you, and he put you in a neck brace and said, you're going to have to wear that for the rest of your life. You would think that he was insane. But when you go into a doctor and they say, well, you have some problems with your knees, your hips, your back, your ankles, or your feet, we're going to have to immobilize your feet for the rest of your life. You just go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because we've been hearing that same story for now 50 years. And when you hear a lie long enough, it becomes the truth. So we're creating a movement. We want people to feel the world, to live life feet first. We want them to experience what it's like to use your body the way it's meant to be used. And we're up against 50 years of propaganda and mythology. If you look at footwear in the 60s, the late 60s, it was like ours. It was really thin soles. It was wide enough toe boxes so your toes could spread and relax. They were super flexible, super lightweight. People playing basketball, they played in Chuck Taylors, and they weren't getting the type or quantity of injuries that they're getting now. And Irene Davis from Harvard asked some guys from Adidas and Brooks at a panel discussion we were on, what problem were you guys trying to solve? And they didn't have an answer. And so,
yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, I said, look, the more you understand biomechanics and the research about true minimalist footwear, and we can talk about the distinction there in a minute, and the more you look at modern athletic shoes, the more it's impossible to conclude that there's a problem, that they're simply wrong. And I said that, and the guy from Adidas said, yeah, but not everyone's going to just switch to your shoes right away. It's like, wow, that's your answer? Holy smokes, that is not a response.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
here we are.
Well, it's like your website. So I'll put all the links in the show notes for our listeners, but our feet are meant to bend, to move, to flex, and to feel the world. And that is that your tagline. And I think it's so important to teach people that for indoor training, outdoor training, walking. I went to Paris and I wore my shoes every day because you're walking miles a day. And I don't want to wear big, bulky shoes. I mean, you'll know, we'll kind of dive into that more, but you notice a big difference if you put a pair of these shoes on and then put on big, bulky running shoes, which I haven't worn for I don't know how many years, but it's so crazy that, people don't realize how disconnected their feet are from the ground, and they don't have that benefit of earthing and grounding and training barefoot.
Well, let's start with the simple thing. We know that if let's say you break your arm and you put it in a cast while it heals, when you take the cast off, it doesn't magically come out stronger. It comes out weaker and atrophied. And you have two choices. You can either keep it in a cast and not use it, or you can build up some strength and it'll work again. It's no different with your feet. In fact, Irene Davis at Harvard, again, she's done research that shows if you just put in an orthotic, if you just stop letting your foot move naturally, within a very short period of time, you lose a surprising amount of strength. The only way your feet can be strong is if you use them. The only way you can use them is if your shoes let them move and then flex. And if they don't, again, eventually your brain shuts down and doesn't pay attention. You don't have the strength. You don't have the balance, because that's part of what your feet are doing. And what can happen, I'm certainly not guaranteeing this, is that you end up doing what my dad did, which is tripping, falling down, breaking his hip, and dying 2 weeks later.
That's not good.
No,
Yeah.
It was horrible.
That's awful. So what are some signs and symptoms that people are getting? You're just saying falling, tripping, not recovering from injuries, but signs and symptoms that they need to be in a minimal shoe, or that the shoe's wrong fit for them.
Well, let's ignore the sign and symptoms, just use the logic part. In fact, I asked Irene, we were just together at an event this weekend, and I said, you were originally teaching people to make orthotics and teaching them to post the foot and, do all this. What was your come to Jesus moment? And she goes, it was actually a process where I realized when I was teaching physical therapists that when people come in with any injury we could think of, our goal was to get them to move as quickly as we could. But why were we doing something different with their feet? It just didn't make sense. So if the idea of using your body the way it's supposed to be used makes sense, that's enough of a reason. Everything else, yikes, my apologies. I got things suddenly ringing all over the place. Oh my God. And of course, these are all spam calls that are coming in.
Oh no.
So yeah, love it. My apologies. I have now shut off 2 of the 3 things that make noise. Okay, so.
Distractions, I know. So the natural fit.
Yeah. Well, let me to answer your question about what the signs and symptoms may be. This is problematic because I'm not a doctor. Don't play one on TV. We're not making medical claims or promises. What I can tell you is that so your feet are supposed to bend and move and flex. If you don't let them do that, that natural function tries to move upstream into your ankle, your knee, your hip, and your back. But those joints are not meant for that same function, which is what causes the stress and pain. We have thousands of testimonials from people saying that once they got out of their big, thick shoes and started being barefoot or wearing ours, those issues went away. Everything from plantar fasciitis to knee osteoarthritis to back pain and hip pain. Again, not trying to make a promise or a medical claim, but just think about it logically. If you let the part of your body that's designed for balance and agility and stability do its job, then it's taking the stress off those things that aren't meant to do that job.
Well, going back to what you mentioned, the word orthotics, pet peeve as a personal trainer for, it's been over 25 years. I'm getting older, so it's been a long time. And when clients come to me and they say they're in the shoe with extra support, or they need pronation shoe or stability shoe, that, and then they go to their orthopedic doctor, their physical therapist, they're told to wear orthotics. So what I figured out years ago is all right, the same with nutritional therapy. That's a Band-Aid. Let's look at the big why and figure out the root cause. What's not functioning at optimal level, and let's correct that. So often is your foot, or your glutes aren't fine because you're not landing right, Right. So kind of what you're finding is the natural fit, natural motion, the natural feel of your shoe will help teach people how to move correctly and engage the correct muscles so they hopefully avoid common injuries as plantar fasciitis or knee, hip pain, back pain.
If you want to see runners with unbelievable form, you can find them pretty much everywhere. They're under the age of 4. You watch kids, especially kids in bare feet, go for a run. First of all, they're doing something that most runners never do, which is smile and laugh. And the other thing they do is they stop when they're in the mood to stop, and then they roll on the ground for a while, and then they get up and do it again. This is what we all did when we were kids. That's the way we all ran. You look at their form, they're putting their feet under their body. They have great backside mechanics. They're using their butts. They're not overstriding. They're not reaching out. They're not, putting extra strain on their hamstrings. They do it all right. And then if you want to see that change, it's really easy. Track them down a couple years later when they're in shoes. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Well, that book I read years ago when I did the natural running certification course through Newton was hosting Newton Running Shoes. They had a great training program. It had us read the book, Natural Running, I think that he wrote. But it was really interesting, but it was a history of basically Nike and the shoe industry and how they kept changing every year. And one company does this and they do that. And then they change the colors and they add more heel and they keep changing the shoe to have more of a high heel. So talk about the effects of having a heel and that support. And obviously, if you've been aware of this stuff, it is more heel striking. And when we're running proper mechanics, we should be landing more midfoot strike.
Well, people are going to get in a tizzy about that. So let's address something that most people don't realize is that analyzing strike patterns, there's 2 problems. One is, if you watch something on video, what you see is not necessarily what you get. So there may be a runner whose heel touches the ground first, but he's not actually really loading until he becomes more midfoot or forefoot, just because of how fast his body is moving through space and how fast his leg is moving in the opposite direction. So what you see is not always accurate.
Exactly.
That's one thing. The other thing is we're usually looking at professional athletes, which is really stupid because they're doing whatever they can think of to try to win. You and most people listening are not 105-pound Kenyans. And so to compare yourself to a 105-pound Kenyan who can run a marathon in 2 hours and slightly over that amount of time is ludicrous. So, but that's the thing that we do. And we go, well, I should just be like that guy. It's like, well, but you're not that guy. Mm-hmm. So in the same way, I'm never going to run a marathon. I'm a sprinter. I don't even know how to take a turn on a track. It's not my thing. So, I hear there's turns on the track. I've never actually used one. So there's that. So here, think about the following. Actually, Dan Lieberman at Harvard has a great video of an African runner who just was a habitual 4-foot strike or 4-foot lander. Let's not even use the word strike. And then they put a pair of higher heeled running shoes on him, and he immediately became a heel striker. Now, this is not rocket science. If you think about it, someone who lands on their 4-foot, their heel is maybe only a half an inch off the ground, maybe an inch off the ground when their 4-foot touches down. If you put 3/4 of an inch of padding underneath their heel, then their heel's going to hit first because you've just changed the geometry of how they were normally landing. Even if they try to land the same way, they can't because you put something under their heel that gets in the way of their natural landing. So that's part one. The other thing that happens when they do that is what ends up going on is instead of using your muscles and ligaments and tendons as the natural springs and shock absorbers they're meant to be, you end up landing in a way that puts what's called an impact transient force spike. It goes right up through your joints. Now, there's arguments about whether that force spike itself is the problem. Backing up to Irene Davis, her contention is that it's the speed of force of that impact transient that is really the problem because you just can't address that in real time. Your body's just not wired for that kind of speed of force. And so that's an issue there. So wait, what did you ask?
I forget, but I was more looking at like the design of a old-fashioned shoe, a heel, puts you into a heel position landing
totally
first.
Does. So that's what it does. But let's back up to the why. Here's something that most people don't know, and you won't read this in Shoe Dog. So the whole idea of elevating your heel came from some people. I don't know if they were podiatrists or orthopedic surgeons who worked in the same building that Nike was in. And Bowerman said to these guys, hey, we're getting all these guys with Achilles tendonitis. What do you think we should do? And they said, well, clearly their Achilles have shortened from wearing higher heeled shoes. So you need to make higher heeled running shoes to accommodate that. Later, these same guys recanted and said, we made that up because we were making prosthetics and everything we were thinking was through a prosthetic lens, but there's no evidence for this. But also, just like you said, the shoe industry is full of a bunch of copycats. If something starts to sell well, then everybody else is going to try and copy it so they can make the money off it the next year as well. And then they're on to the next thing a couple of years later. So that idea, that elevated heel idea took off for whatever reason. And not because it was good for you by any stretch, because it just jacks up your posture and makes your pelvis shift forward, which means you're putting more strain on your lower back. You actually tend to lock your knees more when you're standing that way, which again puts force right through your joints instead of using your soft tissue. So it was a made-up idea that took off. And again, it reminds me, it's one of my favorite sort of old jokes. This couple, they get married and they're having their first big holiday, and the husband says, I'm going to make a pot roast. And he pulls out the pot roast and cuts it in half and puts it in 2 pans and puts it in the oven. And his wife says, what's with the putting it in 2 pans thing? He goes, I don't know. My mom taught me that's the way to do it. So I just, that's the way I do it. So one day the wife asks her mother-in-law, so why do you do the 2-pan thing? And she goes, my mother taught me how to do that. And it's just the flavor is better and it just cooks a little more evenly and you have more control over that. And then one day the wife asks the mother-in-law's mother, so where'd you learn the 2-pan thing, that makes the flavor better and all the rest? She goes, flavor better? I just never had a pan big enough for a roast beef. Or pot roast, whatever it is. That's the way shoes are. It's like someone does it and then everyone copies it and then eventually they make up a story to justify it.
And, and then people it's hard because as with nutrition, performance and supplements, it's very confusing what is right because everyone's got these huge marketing funds and campaigning on articles you read and you just don't know what to believe. And then everyone says, if you have this problem and that problem, you need to wear shoes in your household all the time. Never go barefoot and cover it up.
Let's address a couple things. Whenever I talk to people who are claiming that their shoes are super comfortable because of some magic technology, or that they're faster because of some other magic technology, or they have additional energy return because of some new magic technology, I ask a really easy question and no one's ever given me an answer. I say, so where's your proof? And one of the things that there's no proof for is personalized recommendations for footwear. So there's a brand that I won't mention by name, but it rhymes with the Rooks. I'm in
Brooks, Seattle. That's familiar to that company.
Yeah. So Brooks, they do this whole thing they call finding your run signature. They have you squat a few times. They look at what your knees do. They put you on a treadmill in socks, which is brilliant. They don't want you to do it in bare feet because they don't want you to get the idea you can run in bare feet. And then from that, they determine which shoe you should wear. There's just no evidence that it reduces injury or improves performance. And same thing when I was talking to the guys from Adidas and from actually it was from Brooks. And they were describing, they're doing a custom made midsole that's going to be 3D printed and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, where's the evidence that it reduces injury or improves performance? And the answer that they gave was, doing that kind of study would take a really long time and be really expensive. And there's a lot of confounds. And I'm thinking, are you kidding? This is $1 billion question. You have a lot of incentive to answer it, and you've had 50 years and billions of dollars at your disposal to answer it. You can design this study. You can do this test. It's very, very doable. And when you look at the stuff coming out of labs like Irene's and Sarah Ridge at BYU, Isabel Sacco in Brazil, tons of information about how natural movement can be really beneficial, way more than people on the other side of the equation. So when people say there's a debate about minimalist, it's like, no, there's actually not. We have a whole lot of evidence and are collecting more, and they do not. And the other piece of the puzzle is that there's confusion about what's minimalist. So Irene, I'm referring to her a lot because she was the one who is really spearheading a lot of this research. She breaks things down into what she calls true minimalist and partial minimalist. I call it true minimalist and fake minimalist because I'm not an academic. And the true minimalist is us. It's a lot of products from Vivo Barefoot. It's a number of products, but not all of them, from Vibram Five Fingers, and a couple, but kind of tricky, from Merrell. And I say kind of tricky because the Merrell ones, I can't get them on my feet. They're too narrow for my feet. But then there's a whole bunch of other products that are sold with the minimalist label and claims that they give you all the benefits of being barefoot. But no barefooter would say that in a million years, and no true minimalist would either, because they have too much padding. They're too narrow on your foot. They reduce the amount of feedback you get from the ground too much. And sometimes they're too heavy as well. So this is like you said, it's a marketing problem also that we're up against.
So let's see, I've got like 10 questions I keep writing down on a piece of paper. So minimal shoe, let's maybe go back and describe, the minimal shoes are labeled out there, as you just said. And then there's the drop. I have a client that sees the shoe store, the podiatrist or Canton Ranch, and they would say, get 10% drop or 8%, and then work your way to 0% drop. So maybe explain to people, if they've never used a minimal shoe for training, and we'll get into if it's good for endurance, long running, but what is the definition of that?
It's basically, if you're standing on the ground, your heel's at the same level as the ball of your foot. That's a zero drop. That's neutral. Anything where your heel is raised, that's creating a drop. If we think back to the 70s, there was earth shoes where they had a negative lift, so that's a negative drop. And the idea that you need to start from wherever you are and slowly work your way down, that's more marketing bullshit, and was invented by people who were making shoes where they were going to go to a zero drop shoe. And so they were saying, well, you have to transition. I mean, doesn't it make sense if you've been adapted to this, you have to go slowly down, down, down? And the answer is no, in the same way that Irene has identified partial minimalist. It's that same thing. It's kind of like saying that if you come home and kick off your shoes, you shouldn't be able to walk barefoot, which is, of course, ludicrous. We all do it all the time. Mm-hmm. So completely made up marketing nonsense. Mm-hmm. And what you want to do, though, is when you switch to something that is a true zero drop product. And by the way, you can have a zero drop shoe that's still not great because it's so much padding underneath the zero drop. So you're still losing the ability to feel the ground while you're in a proper position, kind of. So it's weird. Or sometimes there's a zero drop shoe, but it's only zero drop because when you're in mid stance, your heel is at the same height as the ball of your foot, but there's like this crazy arc in the heel, and there's a flare in the sole and heel, and there's a whole lot of toe spring. So there's ways that you can have something that is zero drop has come to be somewhat synonymous with minimalist or barefoot in a way that, again, people misuse to make you think that they're giving you something more valuable than they are. And so what you want to do instead is just switch to it. And then just start really slowly getting used to what will be a new movement pattern, because without all that crap underneath your foot, it's going to make you move differently. It can't not, unless you're already a perfect 4-foot landing runner, which there are some. There's a lot of middle distance runners that I've seen in the lab where they just have perfect form. You could put bricks on their feet and it won't make a difference. But the average person, you want to just start really, really slow, like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and see how you feel the next day. And if you feel soreness, that doesn't mean you need to get stronger and get used to it. I mean, that's part of it, but it means that you're just doing too much. If your calves are sore, your Achilles are sore, you're either landing on the ball of your foot and trying to decelerate too much, or trying to control the deceleration too much, or you're pushing off with your foot instead of using your hips to lift your foot off the ground, essentially. But suffice it to say, you want to wait till you can run for 30 seconds and you feel good. You feel like, I want to keep going. And then the next time you do it, add 10 seconds and then add 10 seconds after that and keep doing it. And soon you'll be able to do much more. So it's not that there's any, again, it's sort of like suggesting that to walk barefoot in your house, you'd have to switch to a lower drop till you could make it to the bathroom.
Sadly, that's what people, when they think they have to wear these big shoes for, as you said, inside their house, but just for personal training clients, their workouts, that they feel like they have to have all this support. I'm like, those are running shoes and you shouldn't be wearing those running anyways, but why are you wearing them in here? We're moving all different directions and you got to move quickly and whatever type of exercise we're doing, balance, stability, one-legged stuff. standing on a Bosu, a foam pad, the pillow pads, you have to learn how to engage your foot muscles and feel where your foot is and distribute your weight over there. So you're not just rolling out and your foot's kind of doing the claw. But to get people barefoot, they don't want to wear bare feet because they think it's creepy and dirty, but the hands are just as dirty. But anyways, they, trying to get them all wearing XERO shoes where some of us look pretty cute because we're all coordinated in your shoes because I got a bunch of them wearing them. But the natural fit, just going over your website, and then I kind of talk about the training in them, as you said, but the wide toe box is a big part because I know I have a bunion and my feet are not beautiful, but I think they're a lot better looking because I switched years ago to a wider toe box. And I think that's the main part of a shoe is that wider toe box is huge for people to get out of those. I don't understand the heel on shoes or the pointed shoes. We're not wearing high heel dress shoes to working out think of what the position people's feet are in women's dress shoes. And that's what you're wearing in a running shoe.
Oh my God. The idea that, that beauty equals pain or appropriate equals uncomfortable is absurd. But the pointy thing is incredible. You want to use your foot, you want to engage your arch. And if your big toe is moved in slightly, it cuts off circulation and it can't function properly. So just that pointy toe thing is horrible. And I know people who get shoes like 2 sizes bigger than what they really need just to try and get the width, but even that's not really enough. So it's I don't even know where that one came from because that is a total mystery about why you would want to squeeze your toes together and think that that's useful. And look, as a sprinter, sprinting spikes do that even more than regular running shoes. And that was just for ease of manufacture. So the notion that, because you really do need to be locked into your shoe when you're a sprinter. And if you're going to do that and accommodate all the myriad different foot shapes that exist, that's a manufacturing challenge. It's actually something we're looking to fix. But regardless, the easier thing to do is just convince people that when you put on a sprinting spike, it should feel like you're a Chinese woman getting your feet bound.
That's what it's in that book. When we did the natural running training through Newton Shoe Company, it was interesting to look at different types of feet after they're bound like that. And that was a good example visually to see this is what happens to your foot when you're bound together. So the next part is the natural motion. So flexible soles let your feet bend and flex naturally, low to the ground, designed to help balance and for agility, which is exactly why I want my clients to take off their trail running shoes or rigid running shoe when I'm working out, training them, because they can't feel the ground. And I think flexible and movement in there so you can stand on a Bosu or balance or even on the ground and do a squat correctly. Night and day difference. A single leg lunge to balance. I can't see what's going on, and they have all these hip, knee, and ankle issues, and it's amazing how you can correct so many of those out of balance injuries.
Totally. Well, the low to the ground thing is hugely important. We have some people who do professional sports in our shoes, and one of them emailed us and said, I couldn't sprain my ankle in these shoes if I had to. But instead, you put a couple inches of foam underneath you, you hit that edge, and that just spins your foot over and, you're just out of luck. So that's a piece too. And the same thing with like hiking boots. People say, well, I need ankle support. Well, you only need ankle support because you have a sole of your hiking boot that's so stiff that if you land on anything that isn't level, it's going to twist your ankle automatically. So if you have something that lets your foot bend with all those wonderful bones and ligaments and tendons in your foot, then it can bend around the thing that you stepped on instead of being thrown out of whack because you stepped on something.
Yeah. And for example, I had a client today that I just started personal training. So she's new to my style of training and workouts, that she plays tennis all the time and has rolled her ankle many times. And I had her stand on the Bosu without knowing that she had multiple sprained ankles in her history playing tennis. And she was like, could not stand still on the, when you do the flat side up on a Bosu.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, we know what to work on. So let's make it a little easier. Now I have the little tip to people when they're at home, when they're brushing the teeth, ask what type of toothbrush do you use? Okay, Sonicare. Well, it beeps every 30 seconds. Start wearing, make sure you're wearing your bare feet and feel the ground and stand on it each 30 seconds that you're standing your foot and work on that balance and stability. But, so many people, they have never really learned how to work on their balance and their foot muscles.
Well, and quite the opposite. again, they've been put in shoes that
Yes.
that deliberately attenuate that and make it impossible. And then again, they go to some doctor who puts them in an orthotic, which makes it even worse. It blows my mind because it doesn't. You really don't have to think very hard to realize that letting your body do what's good kind of works. My favorite is Adidas has their Boost Foam, and they show how bouncy it is by bouncing a 1 pound steel ball on it. And look how much energy return there is. And I hate to point out the obvious that you're not a 1 pound steel ball. And foam responds to the speed of impact and the weight itself. So it's force, it's mass times acceleration. And the way you hit the ground is not the way a ball that's just falling in space hits the ground. So who cares what a steel ball does? What happens to you? And then they get all mad at me when I say things like that.
So going into training, so if our listeners are triathletes, endurance runners, are these shoes?
Take off your damn shoes. Oh, sorry, what?
What should people do if they're switching? Should they switch their shoe for training indoors and outdoors, or just do sprint work? Or what have you found works for people and how to transition into them?
Yeah. Again, you just want to be as natural as you can, as often as you can. And unfortunately, there's not just a set plan for how to make the transition. We all love to have a 5-step plan, but the plan is really as simple as what I described before. Yeah, it's when I teach people about running barefoot, I go, take off your shoes, find a nice, smooth, hard surface, because that'll give you the feedback that you need, and go for a really short run, like 30 seconds. And if it hurts, do something different until you're having a good time. If you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong. If it doesn't feel good, you're doing something wrong. And then just slowly build up the amount of time, slowly integrate that more and more. If you're in the gym, get out of your shoes. If you can, just get out of them. Again, you can wear our stuff because that's the next best thing. If you hang out with power lifters, they're going to be deadlifting barefoot in their socks or in a pair of Chuck Taylors or in our shoes. So they're already hip to this. But in most gyms, they get very nervous. I did a stress test on in a lab, and I did it barefoot on the treadmill. And at the end of this stress test, they were dumbstruck. They said, "We've never seen anyone actually do that." And I went, "I can't believe everyone doesn't do that."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just do it. Just make the move and just build up your strength slowly. And there's foot exercises you can do that are helpful as well. Mm-hmm. Sarah Ridge at BYU used a protocol that Irene Davis had developed for doing foot strengthening as well. And if you do that along with making the transition, you get bonus points. It's really helpful.
And just, I find as I was saying with personal training clients, that if even jumping rope and learning how to land is such a great drill to give people, just a slight little hops. Yep. Like, here's how you land when you run. Ideally, this is what I want you to do. So jumping rope in place for 30 seconds and building that up and doing intervals of the jump rope like that with your shoes on, I think is a great way to teach people.
It's really good.
Do that 30 seconds and go run a sprint, 50-meter sprint for me, and then jump rope. That actually is a drill to do.
Yeah. Have you ever played with any of the curved treadmills?
I really want one. They're super expensive, but they're great.
Yeah, they're very expensive. But the thing with them, same thing, is that you basically learn to get your foot underneath you, because when you put it too far in front of you, it hits the curve and just like kind of slides down. And I've seen a lot of people where just some time on a curved treadmill gets them out of the habit of overstriding and gets them more into a natural running form.
Yes, I think that's a great, if you have one of those at your local gym, it's a great thing to practice on, because it's amazing to take advantage of that. So we are running out of time. This is definitely one of my favorite topics, that metabolic efficiency. I just did a podcast last week that I just, could talk forever about this, but natural running and, the barefoot connection to the ground and wearing these type of shoes that you guys have are really important, I think, for performance, for athletes, but just people daily living. And if I can get everyone in the gym setting to get out of those crappy running shoes and get this shoe, because even people switch to Nike and have they're minimal shoes they say they sell, but it's really not the same at all. And their feet, they don't have any grip and feeling to the ground. So I still have people slipping and sliding and their feet move around too much. That, these shoes are comfortable. And can you just talk a little bit about the design? Because they have some uniqueness in the design. And then we'll post the links how to buy them in the show notes.
Yeah. And look, I'm the first one to say, there's times and places for doing things other than what we're talking about. As a sprinter, there's not a sprinting spike that's designed properly. I'm working on that, hint, hint. But regardless, so when I'm on the track, when it's time to race, I put on my spikes. I kick them off as soon as I can, but there's the right time in the right place. So what we do with XERO shoes, we make them nice wide toe box so your toes can spread and relax. We don't elevate your heel, so we don't mess up your posture. They're super flexible soles. You can roll them up in any direction, put them in your pocket. They're low to the ground, like you said, for balance and agility. Like, maybe 6 millimeters worth of rubber, and then there's a little optional 2 millimeter insole if you want more or less barefoot feeling. One of the cool things, we have a heel strap that's inspired by our sandals that holds your heel in place really nicely and very comfortably. There's also these little inverted V straps. I can't describe it. You'd have to see them on our website, that go around your midfoot, around your instep, that hold your midfoot in place, which actually lets your toes relax even more. So they're not sewn down. They're not a decorative element. They're something that actually is functional. And then they're super lightweight. Like our running shoe for men's 9 it's like 7.6 ounces. And even our hiking boot, or our trail running shoe is only 9.6 ounces, I think, for men's 9. And our soles are designed to last a long time. Unlike running shoes where they say you need to replace them every 300 to 500 miles, we used a rubber that we designed that has a 5,000 mile warranty on the sole. And when we told our rubber manufacturer the qualities that we wanted, he said, "But that's not how they make running shoe soles." We went, "Yeah, no joke. That's why we want to do it this way." So, and they're affordable. We wanted to make these. Exactly. We don't like the idea that running shoes should be something that are out of reach of human beings. They're not super cheap because making things is expensive, contrary to what people think. But we want them to be affordable, and that's something that I think we've accomplished.
That's what I was going to say next, that the pricing of these shoes is pretty much unbelievable, because I just had a client go buy Ons and some other shoes they got at running store that they've sold there, and they're like $150 each. So these shoes are about $90. And to me, that's almost half off of what's out there now. So, and to get a shoe that's not going to break down in a few months because you're not running incorrectly with it. So it's a great investment. I think this is something people might want to try off-season triathlon training, endurance running. And as you spend more time indoors and doing more the strength training and working on balance, stability, your core work, this is a great shoe to start switching to, and then start adding that jump rope interval set, start doing your mountain climbers even with it, and feel that your foot to the ground and feel that single leg lunge. And a TRX suspended lunge is one of my favorite exercises. It really gets people to balance, and you put these on, and instead of a running shoe, you'll figure out how to do the ground to standing exercises correctly and fire up those glute muscles that we all need more of, and strengthen those foot muscles so we can keep our feet healthy and happy, because we need them.
Agreed. Yeah, I tried to make all these noises go away and they keep coming out my
Okay. Yeah, so we'll put everything in the show notes, but anything else we can look forward to hearing from you guys, and what your next step is and how to find you?
Our goal is really simple. We just want to give people the opportunity to have the fun and freedom of natural movement in any situation. So we're expanding our line of both casual and performance shoes and sandals for both summer, fall, spring, winter. I think I covered all 4 seasons. And so both was not the appropriate word to use for all 4 seasons. And just, be on the lookout. You can find us obviously at XEROShoes.com. That's XERO with an X. And on social media everywhere /XERO Shoes or @XERO Shoes.
Well, good deal. Thank you so much for your time. I know we're sticking with 30 minutes, so you're probably getting phone calls because you're supposed to be somewhere. I just realized I kept you over 15 minutes. But thanks for sharing the great information, and I'll let you get back to work.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for your support, and I really hope that this is helpful for people. We're really available. We've got a great team. If you have any questions, anyone has any questions, just reach out. We're happy to help.
Great. Thanks so much.
Okay, take care.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.